What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's my team selection for Game Week 14. So I'm going to run you through how the team is looking, and the big talking point is whether I get SAKA in for a hit or do I delay it for a little bit longer. I've got 2.6 million in the bank, so there is a bit of flexibility there, but do I spend that money this week? I'll talk through that and quickly show you how I did in Game Week 13. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already, and check out Fantasy Football Hub's Green Friday offer that's on at the moment. 30-day free trial, 30% off. Links in the description below, and more on that to come later. So let's start with how I did in Game Week 13. And despite the fact that I didn't own SAKA, and I sold Strand Larsen, who got a brace, for João Pedro, who blanked, and I had Dominic Solanke, who was sent home ill by Ange Postecoglou, it actually wasn't a terrible week. I got 72 points, and that took me from about 930k up to 900k. So a small green arrow considering where I am, but also much nicer than getting a red arrow, especially when SAKA was so popular and got an 18-pointer. The players that I did have actually did alright for me. So Palmer captain, 28 points. Salah got 13. Only a 1-point difference there in captaincy, but I'm quite glad that I stuck to my guns on Palmer captaincy. Obviously, a lot of people were put off because he hadn't scored a huge amount recently, but he had had some tougher games, and I wanted to back against Salah, who I knew would be the top captain. In the end, it made very, very little difference, but I'm still happy I stuck to that decision. And Bruno Fernandes came in with 2 assists of his own to finish on a 9-pointer. The only other player that got a return for me was Gabriel. Goal and an assist, even though obviously he conceded twice to West Ham, still finished on a 9-pointer. So another one of those game weeks, and I've had a lot recently, where the score is pretty good. It's a green arrow, but only a few players have actually returned. So Salah, Fernandes, Palmer captain, and Gabriel, that is it. My other 2 Arsenal defensive players, Raya in goal, 2 points. Saliba only 1 point. Pigott conceded to Leicester. That was a 2-pointer as well. Mbeumo, Rodgers, João Pedro, and Raul Jimenez, all 2-pointers. So it wasn't a case of the whole team chipping in, but enough players did to make sure that I didn't get a red arrow. Rodgers came off the bench for Solanke. There was at least one opportunity, maybe the only one, where if Watkins had looked up, Rodgers would have had a really good chance for a goal. I understand why Watkins didn't really look up. It was a good chance for himself, but it would have been easier for Rodgers to score. So a shame that he didn't pass, but obviously I was banking on Solanke playing that match. From what Ange Postecoglou said, Solanke turned up to the stadium, and then obviously Ange Postecoglou found out he was ill, and then he sent him back. So he can't have been that bad if he turned up. Like, if he was bad before that, he just wouldn't have even come at all. So hopefully from Game Week 14 onwards, he'll be good, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So pretty happy with that score. The triple Arsenal defence, I think I've spoken about it enough at this point. I still think outside of SAKA, it's not a bad decision, but I probably should have never blocked myself from getting SAKA. For what it's worth, I wouldn't have owned him this week anyway, most likely. I probably would have kept Fernandes for Everton at home. And to be fair, he got 2 returns, and Mbeumo for Leicester at home. So SAKA wasn't really in my plans until at least Game Week 14. So I'm kind of consoling myself with that although I'm on the triple defence and it doesn't look great, I wouldn't have owned SAKA. There's not really anyone else that I felt like I was missing. I mean, I can look back now in hindsight and say I should have sold Raul Jimenez instead of Strand Larsen for João Pedro. Strand Larsen had better fixtures, but we shouldn't pretend that Strand Larsen is amazing and João Pedro and Raul Jimenez are terrible options. It just so happens the week where I sell him, he goes and gets 2 goals. And actually, if you look at the expected goals and stuff recently, and by the way, I'm not saying that Strand Larsen is not a good option. I think he's really good for the price, but I don't think it was a terrible decision to sell him. Like 0.24 expected goals for him against Bournemouth, 0.09 against Fulham, 0.04 against Southampton at home. And you look at Raul Jimenez, 0.58 against Spurs away, 0.72 against Wolves at home. I consider myself a little bit unlucky to not have more returns from Raul Jimenez. And I know people will say that Raul Jimenez is not a good finisher, Strand Larsen is clinical, XG doesn't matter, but it does matter, right? It's one of the best tools we have for predictions. And if Raul Jimenez keeps his place and keeps getting this level of chance quality, the returns will hopefully come eventually. And as I mentioned in my previous team selection video, he does rotate quite nicely with Morgan Rodgers, so I don't have to play Raul Jimenez in those more difficult fixtures. So pretty happy with Game Week 13, all things considering, but I'd like a bigger green arrow this week. So let's talk about Game Week 14. So going into Game Week 14, I've only got the one free transfer, but I do have 2.6 million in the bank ready to upgrade one of my players, and I'll discuss as we go through the video where that money might be spent. At the moment, I've got all three of my Arsenal defensive players in the 11. So Raya in goal, and then Saliba and Gabriel are two of my defenders that make up the back three. And then my third defender is Rico Lewis against Nottingham Forest at home. There is part of me slightly tempted to play Fabianski instead of Raya, just to reduce the amount of damage that's done when Man United score. But I don't rate that West Ham defence that highly, and I'm not super convinced they will get a clean sheet away to Leicester. And so I figure I might as well go or stick to my all-in strategy and just play Raya instead. So that's what I'm intending to do. With Rico Lewis, it's not a guarantee that he will start against Forest, especially as he played the last game. But I think after 8 game weeks of owning him, I've just got to accept that his minutes are pretty good. He started 11 of the first 13 games so far. It's not like there's a huge amount of players that are coming back that might affect that either. I guess De Bruyne is starting to build up fitness. They have got some defenders back, but he continues to start. And if he doesn't start Forest at home, okay, it's annoying because he'll probably cameo off the bench. But then there's a pretty good chance that he'll start against Palace. So I'm probably just going to start him for the next 2 games. If he does start Forest, and I think there's a chance that he misses Palace away, then maybe I will bench him in that game. But for 14, I think either way, I'm just going to start him. And my alternative options are Greaves against Palace at home, who's now back for Ipswich. He wasn't in the squad for the last game, but he is available. Or Pinnock against Aston Villa away. There's not a huge amount of upside from either of those players, so it makes sense to play Lewis instead. By the way, completely random, but something I found out before I started recording this video. Apparently Kieran McKenna for Ipswich, the manager, doesn't usually have centre-backs on the bench. So with Greaves, he's either going to start and play 90 minutes unless he gets injured, or he's just not going to play at all. So that's why I've got him ahead of Pinnock on the bench, because there's not really too much of a concern there. It's not a huge revelation, but I thought it was quite interesting when I read that. So that's why he's ahead of Pinnock on the bench, but I'm not expecting to use him too much anyway. In terms of transfers, there's 3 options this week, at least from what I can see right now. I roll the transfer, which I quite like. There will be chaos in the midweek fixtures. There could be more injuries. It's nice to go into a game week with 2 free transfers. Or I take a hit to do Saliba out to free up a slot for SAKA. Or I ignore SAKA for a bit longer and just do Rico Lewis or Pinnock up to Trent or Van Dijk because I've got that 2.6 in the bank. On Sunday stream yesterday, I was leaning more towards taking the hit for SAKA, but I think I've pretty much talked myself out of that. I'm just not convinced that SAKA is worth a -4 this week. And I know people will say, look at the points you've already lost. I get that, but I can't go back in time and get those points. I'm looking at it from this week onwards. I just don't think I need SAKA for a -4 before he plays Man United at home. He probably will go and get something, but is it going to be another game where he gets 15 plus points? Probably not. And you could turn around and say, well, even if he gets 12 plus and you take off the 4, you've still got 8 points or whatever maths we want to do. But he might just not do that well. Like, it's a possibility. And rather than just force him in this week for a hit, I could get him in game week 15 for free, basically, and have more information about, my squad in general, because I would have had yet another game week. And it's not that I think, obviously I think SAKA is great. I feel like I have to keep saying that even though it's so obvious. It's just the -4. I haven't taken a hit all season. You might say maybe I should take a few more hits and my rank would be better, possibly, but it could also be worse as well. So I don't really see it as a pressing need to take a hit to get him. If I did take the hit, it would either be Saliba to Van Dijk or Saliba to Colwill. The reason to go for Colwill would be so I have the money next week in 15 to do Lewis to Trent. I've got the exact money for that. The problem is Saka's likely to go up in price tonight. If that happens, I'm priced out. I don't really want to move early unless I absolutely have to. We might get good information from the press conferences tomorrow. And I could just do the Colwill Saka move, and if I get priced out of Trent, just get Van Dijk. But the thing with that is I can just get Van Dijk now. I can literally do Saliba to Van Dijk and then Saka in. I just don't think Van Dijk before Newcastle away is that much better than Saliba against Man United at home. So I feel like I can just not take the hit and do it next week instead. So that's where I'm leaning. If I do Lewis or Pinnock to Van Dijk or Trent, I know I've just said they're not that great, but they're both the Liverpool defenders are better than my 4.5 million-ish defenders, right? I could do that. It doesn't completely lock me out of getting Saka, but it does mean in game week 15, if I want him, I've got to take a hit again. So I feel like I'm probably going to roll. I'm not sure I want to take a hit for Saka, and I don't know if I want to commit to getting a Liverpool defender and blocking myself from getting Saka for free in 15. I think I'd rather roll and then probably do the Saliba and Fernandes move to Saka and Van Dijk next week. It won't be that easy to sell Fernandes next week because he's got Forest at home, but I'd still rather have Saka, and I think Saka is a good long-term pick. There is part of me as well that just wants to stick with the triple defence and see it through and just see how well it does, because I think it will do okay overall. Like, so far I've got 1 clean sheet from them in 2 game weeks, but I've also got 2 attacking returns from Gabriel last week. It's not that bad. It just so happens it's 2 weeks, where Saka scored 31 points, so it's really hurt. So I'm probably going to roll, I think, and not make a defender change. But yesterday I was thinking about taking the hit. Today I'm thinking about rolling. Maybe tomorrow I'll be in a different camp. But that's how I feel about it right now. So with my midfield, let's talk about the elephant in the room first of all. And that's the fact that I've got Bruno Fernandes on the bench against Arsenal away. And I'm playing Morgan Rogers against Brentford at home instead. Now, I have said many times in the past, unless you absolutely have to, never bench a penalty taker. And that's exactly what I'm planning to do in game week 14. I'm not sure I can go through with it. I think by the time we get to the deadline tomorrow, I might switch those 2 players around, but I just don't see Arsenal away as a good fixture. And lots of people are considering selling Fernandes this week, partly because they want to get players like Saka and Palmer, which I completely understand, but also partly because he does have a tough fixture. So people aren't expecting a huge amount of points from it. If he had Leicester at home or Ipswich at home or Southampton at home this week, I think less people would be so keen to make that move, despite how good Palmer and Saka are. So he does have a bad fixture. I think it's reasonable to consider benching him with the rest of the squad that I've got. I just don't know if I can go through with it, because part of me just wants to go for the all-in strategy, but I also know deep down, if Fernandes is the one that wipes my triple clean sheet, that really is going to hurt. And I can't help but think about the amount of comments I will get about that if it happens. So that is playing on my mind. But right now, Rodgers is in. I think he's a pretty good option against Brentford at home. I do think he'll start again, but it is likely that he will get subbed early. And I guess that should come into my thinking, because Fernandes almost certainly won't get subbed early. I'm not concerned about him missing this game or anything like that. With Mbeumo, I do have that money in the bank, and I could just not make a defender transfer at all and instead deal with him. And I can actually go all the way up to, let me just check here, let me just reset my transfers. I can go from Mbeumo up to anyone 10 million. Obviously, I couldn't get Saka even if he was cheap because I don't have the slot. I could just go for Son. There is part of me that still wants to make that move, but I'm just not sure I want to lock myself into that much money spent on him. He is a big differential right now, and I don't mind the Spurs fixtures all that much. We know he's the first choice penalty taker. Hardly anyone owns him because they've all got Palmer, Saka, Salah, which makes a lot of sense. I could just do it in one move and keep Fernandes longer term and just not get a Liverpool defender at all and continue. Basically, I'd have Saliba and Son up against Saka and, you know, your defender of your choice, right? I think it's possible that this combination could work out, Saliba and Son, but I'm not confident enough to do it. So I think with Mbeumo, I'm just going to stick by what I said in the transfer tips video. I feel like he's a luxury transfer. I just don't see a massive need to rush him out of my team, and I would rather have I'd rather have the extra transfer next week than sell Mbeumo to someone else. Like Bowen, Matoma, they're all good options, but I don't necessarily think they're massively better than Mbeumo. So I'm probably going to keep him. And then Salah, Palmer, no point discussing whether to sell them. They're obviously both staying. The only consideration is captaincy. Now with Cole Palmer, he hasn't played midweek games this season, and I know that's because he's not in the squad, but part of the reason he's not in the squad is so Chelsea can manage his minutes. So there is maybe some slight concerns about how much game time he will get against Southampton, but I don't think there's that much of a concern about him starting. I think he will be in that team. He came off slightly early against Villa, although it was 85 minutes. He's played 90 minutes every game before that since game week 6. I'm not necessarily expecting 90 against Southampton, but I think he'll easily get 75, 80 plus, even though he's being managed by not being in that European squad. And ultimately, because he's not in that squad, he has had a lot of rest already this season. So unless Maresca says something tomorrow in the press conference, I'm just going to captain Palmer. And I think on paper, right, obviously Southampton away is easier than Newcastle away. I suspect Salah will get something, as he always does, or at least always does this season in particular so far, like a double-digit haul probably. But I'm willing to bet on the fixture just like I was in Game Week 13. And I think because Salah has now got 9 double-digit hauls so far, which is absolutely ridiculous, most people will still captain him. And I think his captaincy will be higher than Palmer. So again, I'm just willing to go for that slight differential and just hope it works out a little bit better than it did in Game Week 13. It's pretty close between the two. If you want to go for Salah, you absolutely should. But I'm going to stick to Palmer. Southampton away, it's got to be done. And then up front, I've got Dominic Solanke, who's currently yellow flagged against Bournemouth away, João Pedro against Fulham away, and Raul Jimenez against Brighton at home. With Solanke, because it was only illness rather than an injury, I'm pretty confident that he'll be available for Spurs in that game against Bournemouth. The nice thing is that they played Sunday, and the next game for Game Week 14 isn't until Thursday. So they've got a pretty good gap to get Solanke back. And because it's illness, presumably he'll either start or he just won't be in the squad at all, similar to what happened in Game Week 13. Because if he's ill, you don't want to put him on the bench, right, and make everyone else ill. So I'm pretty hopeful that he'll be back. The only issue is the game's on Thursday. Ange Postecoglou almost always does his press conference the day before. That means we're not hearing from Ange Postecoglou until Wednesday after the deadline, which is Tuesday. So it is taking a bit of a risk. But for my team, I've got Fernandes on the bench. So if Solanke doesn't play at all, he would just come in. Obviously, I could use my free transfer and the bit of money that I've got to sell him to someone else, like a Jackson or a Watkins. I just don't really want to do that. I feel like as long as Solanke's back and playing soon, I actually quite like the fixtures. Like, look, Chelsea and Liverpool at home in the next 4 is not ideal, but Bournemouth, Southampton away, Forest away in 14, 16 and 18 are okay. Then it's Wolves at home, Newcastle at home. And this is a period where we're expecting him to start when he's fit and available, right? There's not going to be a huge amount of rotation for him. Arsenal away in 21 is not ideal. But then the fixtures get very good again after that. But I think right now, as long as Jackson can avoid the 5th yellow card, he's clearly the better option. I'm just not going to bring him in while he's 1 yellow card away from suspension. I know it's hurt me so far, and he'll probably do really well against Southampton, but I just don't want to take that risk. I don't really want to go to Isak, even if he's available, because it's Liverpool this week. And Watkins is fine, but then I'm putting more money into that position. I quite like the fact Solanke's only 7.5 when I bought him. So I see me holding him for quite a while. I mean, maybe if I make my transfers next week, if I don't take a hit for Saka this week, maybe 16, 17, 18, if I get lucky, I can just roll transfers and maybe I'll use a spare one to deal with Solanke, but I just don't see him as a massive problem. Like, he hasn't had a huge amount of bonus points when he has returned, but he's still got 7 returns in 10 starts. Like, it's not terrible. With João Pedro, he's only just come in. He's got to stay. There is risk with his minutes, in December because of the extra fixtures that Brighton have got. But I think more often than not, when he can start, Fabian Hurtzler will start him, right? I think he's one of the key players in that Brighton team. Wasn't impressive whatsoever against Southampton. Was actually pretty poor. But I think for his value, he's a decent option moving forward. So no plans to sell him. I'm not flip-flopping on that position anymore. João Pedro is staying until he picks up an injury. And then Raul Jimenez, I think he's pretty good this week, Brighton at home. I think there's a bit of... When I tweeted about him the other day, there was some concern about him keeping his place. I think he's just first choice right now. I don't see Muniz coming in as a long-term change to that 11. Maybe, again, because we got games in quick succession, we might see a little bit of rotation between the two. But I think long-term, Raul Jimenez will keep his place. I just think he's a better player than Muniz. He is getting chances. One just needs to go in the back of the net. And it might be that if he keeps getting chances and missing them, Marco Silva might make a switch. But until that happens, I'm just not going to worry about it. And if he does keep his place long term, the fixtures are pretty good for Fulham. And I can bench him for 15 and 16 for Morgan Rogers instead. So, apart from the fact I don't have Saka, I'm pretty happy with that team. I don't feel like I'm missing out too many players. I looked at my suggested transfers on Fantasy Football Hub. And if you want to check yours out, I'll leave a link in the description below. There's currently 30% off and a 30-day free trial as part of their Green Friday promotion. So you can check that out. The AI transfers want me to do Saliba to Trent. I just can't sell Saliba for Trent, I don't think. Not now, anyway. Not this week. I think that's a nice longer-term move. I just don't think I need to do it now. And also, because I've got the money to move Lewis or Pinnock to Trent, I feel like it makes more sense to keep the Arsenal defender. But that's what is currently recommended. Looking at the team on the My Team tool, like I said, obviously it's the same team I've just showed you. If I go into Game Week 15 with 2 free transfers, I've got triple Arsenal defence against Fulham away. I will bench Raul Jimenez and hope that I get the clean sheet and play Solanke instead. I've got João Pedro against Leicester away, Rodgers Southampton at home, Mbeumo Newcastle at home, Fernandes Forest at home, Salah Everton away, and Palmer Spurs away. Like, I still haven't got Saka for that Fulham away game, but I don't feel like it looks as bad next week. Like, it looks pretty bad in Game Week 14 because Mbeumo's away and Fernandes has got Arsenal away, but in Game Week 15 it just looks a bit better, my midfield, without Salah there. Without Saka there. So that's why I want to put the decision off until 15. It might be that I decide to just go without him for a while, but also I could just get him in for free. I just think the team looks fine this week. The only player I feel like I'm missing is Saka, right? And he's up against, in my team, Rodgers, I guess, because a lot of people have got Salah, Palmer, and Mbeumo Saka already. But not everyone is on that. Not everybody has the perfect team going into Game Week 14. It's not like I'm the only person that's got Salah and Mbeumo Palmer but doesn't have Saka. And I think the rest of the team looks pretty good. So I'm going to roll rather than taking a hit. I'm pretty sure I will do that. Let's see what the press conferences bring up tomorrow. I might change my mind. But most of the players I'm happy with. And I know this is wishful thinking, but I actually feel like when I get to Game Week 15, and if I do Saliba out for Van Dijk and I do Fernandes out for Saka, I feel like my team is fairly set. Now, that is famous last words. Loads of injuries will happen as soon as I've said that, but it does just look pretty good going forward. Like Game Week 16, basically going to continue to play double Arsenal defence every week. So Raya, Gabriel, Everton at home, Van Dijk, Fulham at home. Then I can just play one of Lewis, Pinnock, Greaves, or eventually maybe make a 4.5 million defender change. Palmer, Salah, Saka need to go nowhere. I don't have a problem with Mbeumo. And obviously Rodgers is just a quick stand-in for Raul Jimenez. And Solanke's got Southampton away and João Pedro's got Palace at home. You go to Game Week 17. Again, Van Dijk against Spurs is not ideal, but he's the kind of player at that premium price you just play every week, right? He can go and get you a goal from a set piece. Double Arsenal defence against Palace. I could play Pinnock instead of Lewis, who's got Forest at home. Again, Palmer, Salah, Saka, no point worrying about them. Mbeumo's got Forest at home, that's fine. And I would bench Rodgers for City at home and play Raul Jimenez instead. So I'd have Raul Jimenez, Southampton at home, João Pedro, West Ham away, Solanke, Liverpool at home. You go to Game Week 18, same thing. Double Arsenal defence, Ipswich at home, Van Dijk, Leicester at home. Play play Lewis against Everton. Palmer, Saka, Salah still looking good. Mbeumo's Brighton away. João Pedro's Brentford at home. Solanke's Forest away. Raul Jimenez's Chelsea away. It's not ideal, but at this point, if all things go well, which they absolutely won't, I've got 4 or 5 transfers built up. I can start dealing with these slight issues where players don't have the best fixtures. So I'm pretty calm about my team right now, apart from the Saka situation. I think it's fine. I would love a massive green arrow soon to really make me feel better about that calmness about the team, but I think it looks okay. Let me know in the comments below what you would do. Check out Fantasy Football Hub. Take advantage of their Green Friday deal. 30% off, 30-day free trial at the moment. Links in the description below. Give the video a like. Hit that subscribe button, especially if you like the double upload day. I'll be back tomorrow with final thoughts and a deadline stream. We'll catch you then.